left has no idea how much more damage we can do to them as private citizens, as people unfettered by being part of the US government. And as you can see from the campaigning I did for Judge Moore, and Steve as well, we have begun.
You are listening to the Liquid Flannel Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Chuck Williams. Joining me in Nebraska is Brendan Williams. Brendan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man.
Joining us also in Nebraska is our buddy Nick Glessman. Nick, how's it going?
How do you tune in onto a podcast? It's like you're tuning into a radio or anything.
Well, you know, you tune into your app. To your app setting, you know. You tune into your SoundClouds.
Fair enough.
To your iTunes. But also, tuning in from Arlington, Texas is the great Matthew Hodges. Matt, how you doing, bud?
I'm good, man. I'm glad that my ham radio broadcast comes through to you guys clearly enough to be able to record the show each week.
Yeah, you know, because I always hate our backup communication method, which is carrier pigeons. So
right. Yeah, there's a bit of a lag in that conversation.
I mean, they're good tweets, but you know, not program worthy. But you know, as usual, you know, we've got a great guest for you lined up this week. This week we've got a member of Antifa, Nestor. Nestor, how you doing, man?
Great, and there is actually an FM chip in your phone, so you can pick up FM radio and it wouldn't have as much lag.
Oh man, so how do you do that then?
Just gotta get some app or something. I don't
Not
know.
entirely sure because I haven't done it yet.
Oh yeah. Step
I don't know,
one.
man, that sounds pretty
guy.
complicated. I was kind of thinking like a can and a really long string, maybe.
Right.
Step one. Drill.
I did hear it on Alex Jones, so maybe it's fake.
Right.
Fake news, baby.
Absolutely.
Oh, fell for the Jones again.
That's right.
Hey, is it Antifa or Antifa?
That is a really good question because no one knows the answer.
Yeah, this is why Antifa needs some central organization just to settle that
we
question.
thought you could fix this
If you
for us.
say anti-fascist, you're going to say Antifa. If you say this weird word that is A-N-T-I-F-A, it's Antifa.
Right.
I always thought it was anti-Fae, you know, but I guess
prefer Antifa.
So, you know,
Artifar.
if you
No, it's pronounced intifada. You guys, we've been using this word since like the 70s.
Figaro. Yeah, excellent. Well, you know, among other things, we will be learning how to say Antifa and talking about what it is on the program here and tying it into the national conversation.
Maybe dispelling some myths.
Doing a little bit of a Mythbusters on the organization, getting a little bit of a history, a family tree, a family Antifa, and having a little bit of fun along the way. So without further ado, let's just jump right in.
We're taught that after the war the Nazis vanished without a trace, but battalions of fascists still dream of a master race. The history books they tell of their defeat in 45, but they all came out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died. They say the prisoner of Spandau was a symbol of defeat. What else remained in prison? Then the fascists they were beat. So the promise of an Aryan world would never materialize. So why did they all come out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died? The world is riddled with maggots. The maggots are getting fat. They're making a tasty meal of all the bosses and bureaucrats. They're taking over the boardrooms and they're fat and full of pride. And they all came out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died. So if you meet with these historians, I'll tell you what to say. Tell them that the Nazis never really went away. They're out there burning houses down and peddling racist lies. And we'll never rest again until every Nazi dies.
The first times I had ever even heard about Antifa, like we were saying on the break there, was through soccer because they're a big part of European soccer, aren't they, Nestor?
Yeah, the soccer ultras, especially European football, they hold massive banners for political prisoners, for anti-racism, all kinds of.
Yep.
In the U.S., what we would consider like far leftist. That's just like normal stadium banter, and it's amazing.
Right.
Regular human
Well,
rights
and
considered
you know
far
it's
left in
needed
America.
because it counterbalances, you know, the growing neo-Nazi recruiting grounds that the stadiums have kind of become.
Well, and
because,
it's a natural place for it to happen, right? Because you do have this sort of artificial hyper-nationalism that's going on already, which
You have that
if
natural
it's all done in
camaraderie.
the spirit of sporting, you know, camaraderie, then that's one thing. But people can use that as a springboard to say, you know, Italy for the Italians or whatever.
Right.
right. You know, yeah.
My question is, how big is the fascism movement in European football? Like, is there a big like counter?
Yeah, European football. They've got pretty strict rules. FIFA's got pretty strict rules. They've suspended players and fined them quite a large amount for doing Sieg Heils on the field on the
Right.
pit.
For goal celebrations.
So yeah,
You know,
people
how
have
they
been
try and
attacked
pass
on the
off,
field
like, it's the
because of
Roman salute.
doing a Sieg Heil. So they're serious about it.
Yeah, they
They
do,
are-
like, mandatory like smacks in the back of the head if you cut your hair like Richard Spencer with that like side fade.
they're serious
Any day now.
in some senses, but like, you know, professional clubs like Ajax in Amsterdam and Tottenham in England, they were founded by Jewish players and Jewish owners, and so some fans, like opposing fans, will make hissing sounds like the gas chambers
Jesus
and nothing really.
Christ.
Dude, soccer is they don't fuck around
Well, I
out
get it.
there.
I
They
mean,
throw bananas at black players in Europe. I mean, it's not as bad. I wouldn't say it's worse now than it was like 5 or 10 years ago, but it's still evident there.
They're so uncivilized. I mean, why can't they just be more like American fans and just yell at their,
Why can't we
their
just
players that they're not
beat each other
patriotic
up
enough?
like regular drunken assholes?
Right. So honestly, back then though, Antifa to me was a very European thing. Can you speak to, you know, Antifa in the US, like about when it started to be a thing, and, you know, I guess how the movement has grown in the last couple years, Nestor?
Yeah. So Antifa in Europe obviously grew out of late World War I, early World War II fascists, which culminated in the famous Battle of Cable Street, where hundreds of thousands of people in East London ran out to attack the Mosley Union of Fascists, where they were trying to march through a Jewish neighborhood, and they just absolutely got beat the fuck out.
Nice.
So that's like the European history. The U.S. history, it grew out of the anti-racist movement. It's actually anti-racist movement started in Britain as well. It was in response to something that Eric Clapton had said on stage, which I'm not going to repeat.
Very racist man.
He was incredibly
What did he say?
stoned,
Oh, wait, no.
incredibly racist on stage, and a couple of reggae singers decided, hey, let's put on this big event against racism, and that became Rock Against Racism, and then grew from there. But the anti-racist movement grew from that, and modern Antifa within the last, like 2 to 25 years has grown from the anti-racist movement.
I guess maybe we need to back up a little bit for some of our older listeners and things. What does Antifa stand for in general? I mean, you see Trump.
Antifa!
Well, yeah, and tie that back to its roots between the European Antifa and the genesis of the American Antifa.
Okay.
Because clearly they came out of different places, but a shared philosophical point of view. Right. So it's interesting to think about, like, what does the Antifa stand for in America right now, and how that relates to its history.
Okay, so the Antifa stands for anti-fascism, so it's against fascism. Fascism, of course, is authoritarian nationalism with xenophobia, extreme capitalists, national organization of corporations. Just
the root of fascism is based on identity politics.
There's about 90 different variations of what fascism is and how it is enacted through authority and through power. But Antifa is short for anti-fascist. So Antifa opposes fascism. So when people say they're anti-Antifa, it's just a long way of them saying, I'm fascist.
Right.
That's my favorite part about it. It's like, if you're just going to say you're anti-fascism, just say you're a fascist.
Right. It's
Make
just
it
like,
easier.
saying, like, oh, I'm anti-racism. And they're like, well, I'm anti-racism. It's like,
So you're a racist?
it sounds pretty racist, bro.
Right.
Well, and I think the reason that you can do that is because, and Nestor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Antifa isn't really an organization. It's a point of view.
Right, it's a tactic.
There's no central organization for it. There's no.
Yeah, it's not a political
there's not
party.
a national board of directors of Antifa that you can point to that's setting policy. So yeah, it's way easier to do that than it would be to say, like, well, we're anti, I don't know, like the National Organization of Women for this particular policy. You know, that's an identifiable group of people, at least.
Card-carrying members.
But with Antifa,
right?
it's not. You're just saying, I'm opposed to the philosophy of being opposed to this other philosophy, and therefore, like, co-signing it. That's obviously been one of the big objections on Twitter, Reddit, other places that people are talking about this. The comment sections of NBC news articles or any of the replies to Donald Trump when he says this, like, you know, how do you square Antifa tactics with what people seem to believe about free speech in this country?
Yeah, well, I think that the idea of free speech and the actual constitutional definition of free speech are wildly different. People think that if you have an opposing view and you speak that opposing view, that you are infringing on someone's free speech, which is not only impossible, but ridiculous. Like, how would you ever have an argument if there weren't two opposing sides? But
Right.
saying that I'm infringing on Richard Spencer's free speech by telling him that, hey, don't genocide me, is somehow violent or more violent than him advocating for genocide, because the free speech amendment to the Bill of Rights says that a government shall not infringe upon the free speech of people, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a government. I'm a single person. I cannot infringe upon your rights to say whatever backwards ass bullshit you want to say.
Right.
Right.
Well, and even if you're using the broader definition of, you know, the principle of free expression that is enshrined in the First Amendment, it does seem like you can draw a line when it comes to intrinsically violent or harmful speech. I don't think that there's any way to frame we need a white ethno-state knowing that that's going to require a genocide and be peaceful. It's not just a point of view at that point. It is something like an exhortation to violence or creating structures that would create violence.
And not to mention, fascism at itself is all about about censorship and taking away that right of free expression. So, how can you, as a supposed fascist, honestly say, I believe in free speech, but you want to take away the fundamental right of what makes America America, if you will.
Yeah, Nick,
I don't
that's
understand
absolutely
that.
right. And that goes to, I mean, this argument that I always make against fascism or letting fascism have a platform is they're going to use whatever tools you give them under a liberal democracy up until the point that they have the power to take away those powers from everybody else. This is, I mean, they manipulate the system so that they can get a foot in the door, and then they take away those rights from everyone else.
They're experts at it.
Well, I think that the public perception of Antifa is that they see what was on Charlottesville and they think violence is like your primary tool in your toolbox, but it's more than just that. Like, you have other methods of combating fascism, don't you, Nestor?
Oh, absolutely. Physical confrontation is the last possible sort of tactic. Like, when you've exhausted all other options, and the only way to stop these people that want to initiate a genocide or want to initiate an ethno-state is to physically block them from doing so, then that's what gets the news headlines. That's what gets people out in the street.
Right.
But there are 1,000 different steps before that, trying to stop these people from growing, stop them from organizing with other people that think that maybe my white skin says that I'm better than you, and they need to eliminate all other people. There's 1,000 other ways from doing that, from stepping from stopping people in the street to, I don't know, looking at somebody's Facebook page and they say, oh, I want to rid the USA of Muslims because they're trying to enact Sharia law. It's like,
Right.
you want to watch that person and see where it is they're progressing and who they're speaking with, how they're organizing. And at any point where you can intervene is far better than standing out in the street and shouting.
Right. Yeah, because the press is going to focus on that one aspect of anti-fascism, anti-fascist movement. Like, oh, they just want to cause trouble. They're just trying to stir up trouble. They want to fight everybody. And that's, I mean, they just need that one sound bite or that one video clip of
it's
somebody,
red meat for them.
Somebody getting punched, and they just zero in on that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and especially when, you know, the easier, or sorry, especially when the more accurate description of violence on the part of Antifa is something along the lines of self-defense. I mean,
right.
For the most part, they're not out there picking the fight, but they are there to prevent the fight from happening or going back strong the other way if somebody actually starts one.
Nobody wants to fight. It's the last resort.
You'll notice Antifa's not out there starting rallies saying, like, Antifa needs to take over this country. Like, they're there because these Nazis are rallying or whatever, saying white people need to take over this country, and they're like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Right. They're not yelling, you will not replace us, you know, so.
They're not trying blood and soil out there.
Right. So, you know, so what are some of the things that you all do on a local level, or that Antifa participates in on a local level? And then how does that tie into the national conversation? You know, I mean, as you know, we just had a revisit to Charlottesville 2.0 here. So
why wasn't that on the news?
Yeah, you know, but how does Antifa handle that, like, on the national level? How does that tie in with what the Nebraska Antifa is doing?
Right. So it was somewhat on the news. It was definitely on Charlottesville's news. Just tonight, they interviewed Richard Spencer on their evening news. They gave him a very long, drawn-out platform to explain his ethno-nationalist stance and why he chose Charlottesville, why he chooses torches, which we all know why he does that. It's because he's a troll, but he's a troll with power.
Keeps the bugs away.
Here in Nebraska, how that relates to different organizations or different organizing against anti-fascism is that we're all opposed to fascists. So, of course, if you're not opposed to fascism, you're probably a fascist. So my grandma is anti-fascist. She saw what happened in World War II.
Good for your grandma.
She was not happy with it. So my grandma is an Antifa terrorist, as the alt-right wants to paint it.
Either great choice of words or poor choice of words.
Anti-fascist here at Omaha, Lincoln, Council Bluffs. We don't have large physical confrontations and like the pitched street battles that are seen in Berkeley or Portland, Charlottesville.
Do you think it's because we don't have the numbers for it?
Neither do we actually see.
Hey, not yet, man. Don't sell yourself short. That may be on its way.
But also, we don't see the neo-Confederate flashpoints like Charlottesville and Durham and so on and so forth. Because Nebraska wasn't even a state during the Civil War, so there's no Confederate monuments for the alt-right to rally around, as is like their current mode of operation. But much of the work done by anti-fascists in Nebraska it's the same as what people in like these pitched street battle cities are doing. The bulk of anti-fascist work is in observation, infiltration, and identification of people promoting racist hate and recruiting for others. So just since Trump's election, the people doing anti-fascist work in Nebraska have successfully identified and essentially stopped a dozen white nationalists before they can grow their numbers, before they can make it onto the street to incite violence, before they can say, well, ethno-states it's just the extension of liberal democracies. We're just going to extend that. And so that's the connection we have to these larger pitched battles in Berkeley and Portland and Charlottesville.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
Use that report button on Twitter. I mean, that's one of the best weapons against creeping fascism right now. Is just try to deny these people a platform.
And my personal story is similar, like how I even found out about, the Nebraska chapter or Nebraska Antifa, was because someone had texted me to let me know that someone that I used to work with and someone that I used to be working friends with was a white nationalist and was going to rallies and was part of a white nationalist group, Identity Europa. So I Google that guy and his name, and the first thing that comes up is Antifa blog, and they've got it laid out. So it's definitely something that's making a real impact on the local level. I wonder, though.
And he lost his job because of that. Because of our coverage, he lost his job because of that.
Right.
Good to
Absolutely. Hear. And I know he was one of those people that's part of that book club. I don't know. When we listen to the podcast, or not we, but when I listen to the podcast.
You're a stronger man than I am, that's for sure.
Those dudes do not sound, with the possible exception of Dan Cleve up in Lincoln, the rest of those dudes do not sound like the kind of guys that want any kind of confrontation whatsoever. And I'm just picturing the majority of that book club being like that. So I just want to be able to round up like 10 big black friends and just like go into that bar and during the book
what's
club.
Up, book club, guys?
Because those are the dudes that are like smashing car windows and leaving alt-right business cards and stuff. And I just want to be like, I just want to prove it to them that they would never say that shit to someone's face.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing it behind the power of anonymity. And they're being
anonymity.
I'm sorry. I can't,
no, it's all good.
Can't talk, but yeah, they're doing it because they know they can say it without any kind of real world repercussions, unless we find out who these people are, get them to their employers, and say, "Hey, is this the kind of person you want working for your company? Is this the face you want to present to your customers?"
Right.
Well, and I think the crazy thing is that you hear from places like the FBI and law enforcement that say things like, hey, if you hear something, say something, right? And if you hear people are saying terroristy sounding things, like they want to exterminate an entire race of people, and they go to rallies about that, then you should be telling people like that shouldn't be like a keeping it a secret type of thing.
For sure.
No matter, what race you are or whatever. And these dudes are doing it so brazenly because they know their white privilege is just going to mean that no one calls them on it.
And the thing is, like, I think we talked about this maybe about a month and a half ago, that how Donald Trump reduced funding. Maybe it wasn't Trump, but I'm sure he hadn't handed it. But they reduced funding for homegrown terrorism, focusing on white nationalism and the white power movement in America. They took away funding for it. Why? Who knows? Man, beats me. But either way, they're having less the federal level and even state and local levels now have less resources, less money to put on it, because they're convinced that the next terrorist attack is still going to be from some Muslim terrorist, which, if you look at the statistics, you're more likely to be killed by a white male than you are by any kind of Muslim or woman or anything else, at least in America.
Right. Which is what makes your work that much more important there, Nestor. So
yeah, just the word of mouth, word of voice, getting it out there and spreading it out there.
What can people do to get involved and to help Antifa? I mean, say somebody wants to get involved and be active in it, or wants to at least be an ally or assist. What are some things people can do?
What could I do on a local level to help promote anti-fascism?
If you follow, I guess, the say something or see something, say something motto, just
sure.
If you see fascists and you can't physically confront them, whether it's because you're physically not able to, or you're concerned of backlash because of that, because they love to dox people, they love to take photos and send it off to 4chan or 8chan and run it through their extensive basement dweller security system.
The term they love to use and the term I hate is weaponized autism. Just a disgusting term.
Send that, tell somebody to make it known that these people are trying to organize against anyone who is not like them, which is 99.9% of the time not white men. So anyone that they're not comfortable being around, then they're going to be angry about. So you see him putting up a flyer that says "Call ICE" on illegal immigrants. Get their photo. Make sure that somebody knows who they are. If you know them personally, blast their name on social media, because they're going to be outed eventually. They hide behind their Pepe flag and their Pepe image, their Kekistan flags.
Right. Yeah.
They love the anime avatars too.
Right. If you don't mind me asking about a particular case that you guys have been on in Nebraska, I do want to ask about this Dan Cleave character, particularly because this guy was actually at the original Charlottesville, correct?
Yes. Well, it was actually Charlottesville 2.0, because they'd been to Charlottesville before, but the Unite the Right rally is what he attended on August 12th.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, this guy is actively trying to move up the ranks. I mean, he's on the Anti-Defamation League's, list or whatever, and he seems to also be pretty comfortable being out in public with his, face on camera, going to Lincoln City Council meetings and stuff. It's clearly a situation where he's not really trying to hide what he's doing, but
and also his tactic, it's not, hey, I'm Daniel Cleave of Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm a junior at UNL. He doesn't go out daily and say, I'm a white nationalist, but he likes these little flashpoints where he knows cameras are going to be, and he can go there, show up, say some ridiculous shit, and then walk away.
Sure.
Which is what Richard Spencer is doing right now. They showed up a few days ago in Charlottesville with torches, 25 of them, They brought out all the media. They were there for less than 10 minutes. And then
it was basically like a flash mob. Yeah. They didn't really announce it beforehand. They just showed up and did the thing.
Not basically, it was
they go out and they spew their racist nonsense, and then they disappear. And that's exactly what Cleve is doing. He shows up in these little spots. He does his dance and he's out of the door.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you say he did a dance, but did he do a rap in response?
He did not do a rap.
Well, he hasn't.
Eminem.
Oh, that's too bad, because I'm still trying to decide whether
he hasn't been on Twitter a lot lately.
Baked Alaska's was the better clapback.
Well, I think that Baked Alaska probably has more experience because, before he was BuzzFeed editor, before he was Milo Yiannopoulos' tour manager.
He worked at the Warped Tour.
Right.
YouTube rapper, so I think he's got some cred.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He's got some street cred right there.
I actually know that based on the rap that he released against him.
Oh, right.
And funny enough...
Well, because it's hard to...
Daniel Cleve, one of his roles in Charlottesville in August, which is a role that Vanguard America has been fulfilling for quite a while now, is that they do impromptu security. They do their own sort of autonomous security. And
of course,
Dan Cleve was assigned to Baked Alaska. There's a video of him pushing away, and I think he was an ADL reporter, kept asking questions, and I guess that this ADL reporter, the Anti-Defamation League reporter, got a little too close when he was asking questions, so Dan pushed himself in and kind of separated the two, because, you have to protect the elites. You have to protect the YouTube rappers like Baked Alaska.
Right.
Right. Who used to be pro Black Lives Matter, by the way.
Yeah,
really, I didn't know that.
You never know what's going to happen, right? I mean, one of your guys might end up getting chased through some shrubbery, and that's that's a major insult to white America and the dignity of YouTube racists.
Yeah, you might get maced. You gotta watch out.
Right, but this puts him by the VIPs of the alt-right. I mean, this is something that he feeds on. I
legit heard people say after Charlottesville happened. I mean, people were posting on Facebook and saying stuff like, "Well, that's crazy, but here it's different, right? That's a South, that's a Charlottesville problem. Like
no,
here
that's
in
incorrect.
Nebraska, like we're nice. It's Nebraska nice. Like we're not like that."
to jump in real quick and say one of the very first branches of neo-Nazi liberation or whatever, for lack of a better term, the first headquarters outside of, I want to say California, was in Lincoln, Nebraska. Probably still is. So, no, Nebraska is not Nebraska nice. Nebraska is Nebraska neo-Nazi haven.
Yeah.
Right.
Same with Idaho and Montana.
That, outside of the South, the neo-Nazis base. I guess if you're considering neo-Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan to be in the same bubble.
They're the same thing.
During the height of the Ku Klux Klan, the highest membership was in Indiana, which was a northern state.
Yep.
There are still a lot. I think actually per capita, there's more Claverns, the KKK Clavern, in California than there are across the United States South. The neo-Nazis...
Once you get out of the liberal areas of California, LA, Sacramento, San Francisco, it's still very hardcore conservative and backwards.
Right. There's a lot of rural...
In the Orange County area,
California,
especially.
People forget about.
Oh, yeah, the rich Republican type area.
And if you're just counting neo-Nazis themselves, the people that exclusively adhere to a neo-Nazi idea of what the U.S. should be, in Lincoln, Nebraska, it was... Gary Locke, or as he prefers to be called, Gerhard Locke, and he used to sport a little.
Yeah, I know. I've heard of them.
Handle or broom mustache, whatever Hitler had.
Nice.
He's still
toothbrush mustache, tooth bar,
contributing to the neo-Nazi movement, despite spending some time in a German prison because he was smuggling neo-Nazi pamphlets into Germany to distribute. And
outstanding.
He still hosts the most European neo-Nazi websites from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Not surprising at all. And
it highlights a really good point, which is that fascism doesn't just grow in. We've got this narrative about like Trump supporters in the United States where they come from the working class, the white working class, the aggrieved classes, but that's not actually where most of his support is. And most of them through history, that's not where most of fascism's support.
It's in the 1%.
It comes from fairly well-off, maybe not well-off, but comfortable white people for the most part.
People who don't want to give up their position in life.
There's a really great story about how that happens even before Nazi Germany, if I could share that real quick.
Yeah, please do.
So
please do.
In 1918, at the height of the Russian Revolution, in 1918, the Revolutionary Insurrectionary Army of Ukraine, led by my namesake, Nestor Makhno, they were liberating a city of 7 million people. They left because there was no central government. There was no leader. They were acting of their own accord. They continued on their sort of, I guess, missionary movement. They went west
right
through Ukraine.
Just proselytizers. It's like going on a Mormon mission.
Right, except they're anarchists.
Very wholesome.
Oh, right.
Nice.
And then I have multiple wives.
So they went west through Ukraine. They encountered the organized and completely equipped forces of Simon Petlura. So Simon Petlura ran his own sort of autonomous region. He had his own army. And at this point in time, the Petlurovsky, if I'm saying that right, I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, but the Petlurovsky considered the Makhnovist movement an important episode in the Ukrainian Revolution. So, not knowing it very well, the Petlura hoped to attract these bands of rebels into their sphere of influence and, place them under his own control because they had a big number of people following them. They needed a lot of numbers. So, very amicably, he addressed Makhno with a series of political questions, just like, I'm just asking questions, bro. So he said, what's his opinion of the Petrolist movement, the Petrolist government? How did he conceive a future political structure of Ukraine? Would he not find it desirable and useful to work in common with them for creation of an independent Ukraine? And the Makhnovist reply was incredibly to the point. They said that in their opinion, the Petrovщина was a bourgeois nationalist movement whose road was entirely different from that of the revolutionary peasants of the Makhnovщina, and that Ukraine could only be organized on the basis of free labor and the independence of the peasants and the workers. And that not only did they not accept union with anyone, but they had nothing but struggle between Makhnovщina, the movement of the workers, and Petrovщina, the movement of the bourgeoisie. So in less than 9 months after that, so I guess to fill that in, they had a short battle. They fought each other. They shot at each other. Makhnovщina shortly took over this region, but they lost it. So 9 months after that encounter, Petlura lost control of his army, and then Jewish pogroms began in his region. Within 6 months, they killed 35,000 to 50,000 Ukrainian Jews, and all of this was 15 years before Hitler even got power in Germany. So this is why nationalism has to be stopped before it becomes fascist action, because nationalism without power is just hot air. But fascism without power is dead in the water.
Yeah.
That's
completely
where
agreed.
You'll find a lot of anti-fascist action will find itself. You can't let nationalism grow to the point where it has power and authority, because then you have fascism.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's a cancer. It's so easy to spread though, because you can just plant these small little ideas like, hey, we're supporting our country, we're supporting our people in quotation marks. substitute that for whoever you want it to be.
Right, yeah, our people as very narrowly defined and usually leading you to some kind of a genocide.
Which goes back to the whole sports thing. You bring back the military aspect of it all. It's a perfect recruitment ground for it all.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I feel like most people could probably separate it. It's just pride in your country versus we need to cleanse undesirables.
Well, right. It's okay, so this was kind of the distinction from my rant the other night about soccer. I mean, was the fact that
it was a good rant, though.
A game is a game, but international soccer, I feel comfortable chanting USA at an international soccer match or singing the anthem, but when people are chanting it at a Nebraska football game, right, it feels a little bit more creepy.
Yeah, I mean, we all get it. We're all in Nebraska. Right. We're all in America.
Non-Americans there,
right? I mean, unless there's some foreign exchange student who just want to come check it out.
Yeah, it's all for them.
Right. You're some kid from China. You suddenly feel very uncomfortable because you got a bunch, 90,000 drunk ass people screaming "America, USA."
Right.
I would definitely feel kind of at unease.
And it's the type of thing where they show videos of people doing it in other countries, including North Korea and stuff, and people here go, that's so creepy and weird.
Look at those freaks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you see, oh my god, look at those badass jets that just flew over us. A show of military strength. Well, that's exactly what we're doing, son.
And it's like Pavlov's dog whipped up in a frenzy. I mean, it's just screaming USA when that shit happens, man. I don't know.
Being in the middle of the country, you can drive basically 12 hours in any direction. You're still in the same country. Why do you have to let people around you know, we're here for USA? Well, no shit. You can't.
Right.
Well, and except when the Penguins NHL team got invited to the White House, and Trump was like, these are some real patriots right here.
They're great patriots.
Where, 60% of the team isn't even American.
Right.
It's like Canadians.
Well, they're from Russia, so
Europeans,
come on now.
And all that. And so, but he doesn't even know. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, it's beautiful.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll jump into something else.
Jump back.
Oh, yeah,
you messed up your flow there, bro.
Jump back. Whatever.
You're never
jump
gonna
in.
get M on this.
Man, no deals. No endorsements.
Jump in the fire.
Jack Flash.
Well, America is plagued by the specter of fascist violence, and in an ironic twist, these fascists call themselves anti-fascist, Antifa. Whenever conservatives want to speak on campus or hold a rally, Antifa groups are a reliable presence, and they routinely try to stamp out speech using vigilante violence, which they perversely justify as a form of self-defense. Mike Isaacson is a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He founded the Antifa group Smash Racism DC, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
So your position, tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this, is people you define as fascists do not have free speech rights.
No. My position is that communities have the right to defend themselves against groups that actively seek to eliminate members of that community.
Defend themselves against violence or defend themselves
against violence? I mean, we're talking about...
No, but physical violence? So if I say, for example...
We're talking about a history, a group that has a history of enacting hate crimes. Yeah, no, we're not... Are we going to pretend like we're suddenly in this ahistorical world where Dylan Roof or Wade Michael Page doesn't exist, where Anders Breivik doesn't exist? Are you kidding me?
No. Are you really a professor, by the way?
What?
Okay, so Nestor, Antifa gets a ton of flack, obviously, in the media, from the White House. I've wondered what that toll is on individuals who are involved with Antifa. And, how do you deal with it with family members and things like that?
Well, I think that the White House itself and the president addressing the threat of Antifa means that we're being very efficient. We're taking down actual known fascists.
Right.
The fact that the president and the White House needs to address that just reinforces that their base is in part fascist white nationalists, KKK members, neo-Nazis, etc.
That their existence kind of justifies Antifa's existence.
Right. Well, definitely, if there were no fascists, there would be no anti-fascist. Of course, if there was no gravity, there would be no anti-gravity.
Right. No one denies that racists and white nationalists and fascists support Donald Trump. I mean, that should surprise anybody. I mean, even conservatives will say, well, sure, those racists do, but they do it for the wrong reasons. You know, I support Trump for the right reasons.
But what are the right reasons for supporting Trump, though?
At this point, that's a great question. I don't think there's a good answer for that.
But at some point, there was a colorable, better answer to that question, which would be something like, he's going to shake up the Washington establishment, or he isn't beholden to like big money interests or whatever. Like, there was a narrative at one point about him where he was better than just being the attractive to racists candidate.
I mean, he was not Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's all.
And then he assigned like 5 different Goldman Sachs executives to his cabinet. It's like he's not beholden to big money.
Oh yeah, no, the fiction didn't last very long. But I agree with Brendan's point that at this point, I don't know how you can even try to disclaim that wing of the Donald Trump party, because it seems to be, it's pretty loud and pretty influential within his support.
Yeah, with Steve Bannon calling himself an economic nationalist, which is basically saying, I'm a white nationalist because economics is a huge part of fascist doctrine. Whatever his name is, the creepy little receding...
Oh, Stephen Miller?
Stephen Miller, yeah.
Too many Steves.
Yeah, he was college friends with Richard Spencer. They built their white nationalist empire within Ivy Leagues.
Right.
And Stephen Miller gets a position in the administration. Sebastian Gorka.
Seb Gorka.
He helped the Iron Maiden, the Ukrainian fascist revolution in 2014.
Vitezi Ren.
Oh, they had to steal a name from a sweet heavy metal band? Come on.
He's got avowed white nationalists and neo-Nazis running his administration. You can't say that they're not there and like hiding in the shadows. They have cabinet positions.
The Golden Dawn in Greece, aren't they pretty popular? Which is a white nationalist neo-Nazi movement.
Right. Well, yeah, and you can be a political party there.
I'm just saying, you guys, Number of the Beast was an absolute jam. So I don't know what the problem is with Iron Maiden in this conversation.
Yeah, how dare they? How dare they take away a sweet heavy metal band and turn it into that?
Right.
Sigh.
About your question about how do we square that with our families?
Right.
I learned anti-fascism from my family.
Right.
It was passed down. Like any good human would oppose attacking others, attacking people that aren't like you. It was a quality instilled in me. It's not like I have to come out to my parents and say, Mom, Dad,
Right.
I regret to inform you I'm Antifa.
Well, you come from a good family.
My parents taught me that anti-racist action is how you should act. You shouldn't discriminate. I mean, that's common knowledge.
I came from a similar type of family. You know, my mom and dad both instilled me, like, you should stand up for things that are against injustice. But now in their later age, they're both retired police officers. So they're both a part of the Blue Lives Matter group, which now has been infiltrated by the alt-right neo-Nazis to push a certain agenda. I've made it quite clear that I don't support that. You know, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm very much inclusive of all people in the country.
Right. If the Blue Lives Matter movement was serious, they wouldn't want white nationalist support.
They would denounce it.
Right. They would say, if you're a white nationalist who's a cop, we don't want you to be a cop. You're not a good cop if you're a white nationalist. You're not a good Republican. But the fact that they choose to ignore that rather than fighting it.
I feel like you can support the police because they do provide, you know, an important service in the country, but at the same time, you can realize that it's also fairly, I don't want to say corrupt, but corrupt.
These groups who are kind of okay with not thinking too hard about their white nationalist support.
Right.
You know, if they were smart, they would force those people out of their groups, but they're hesitant to do that because they know it gives them power because they're a really active participant.
I want to say at least like 60% of the Blue Lives Matter group is just white nationalists who aren't police officers.
Right. Who are just co-opting that.
Yeah, they're just trying to push this narrative that black people and minorities in general are undesirables, and they're the ones committing the problem.
Right. No, I agree. Those are the people who empower actual fascism, because not everybody in Nazi Germany belonged to the SA. They weren't all signed up with the government. You did have a whole bunch of people who kind of, I don't know, chided it from the sidelines, but also kind of benefited from it, and it didn't really affect them day to day, but they held the actual power in the country.
I can't remember what Martin Luther King Jr. said. It was something to the effect that the moderate white majority didn't say anything about it. They just kind of let it happen because it didn't affect them whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. The white moderate that MLK talked about is kind of applicable to the middle class, mostly white, moderate on white supremacy and the rise of fascism in the United States.
You figure that most white people really don't care about white nationalism because it doesn't affect them at all.
Right, they don't have to think about it.
Speaking of Martin Luther King talking about white liberals, I think that being in Omaha, I've learned a lot more about Malcolm X.
Sure.
Obviously, I'd read his,
definitely.
his autobiography.
Oh, yeah, you can go to his childhood home.
Yeah, which they tore down before they even realized who he was.
Right.
When he says, when a white man comes to me and he says, hey, I support you, I'm a liberal, he wants to know, are you white liberal or are you like, I'm a John Brown liberal that's going to kill some white racists? And obviously that's not the full quote, but that's the gist of it. I want to know where you stand. Are you, oh, well, these people are protesting and I don't really support the way they're doing it, but I like that they're protesting? Or are you like, hey, where can I kill some racists?
I definitely belong to the camp of, I'm a Wall Street editorialist who wants to write about how Antifa is so much more dangerous than actual like Nazi marches through American cities.
Right. Look at all the political power.
Suggesting that white nationalism isn't predicated on genocide, which genocide is killing large swaths of people. That's a huge violent act. It's like you have...
Man, it sounds to me like you're just against, free expression.
Definitely. Against free expression of genocide.
Well, that's hard to argue with.
A lot of people seem to, since the election of Donald Trump, seem to categorize themselves as anti-fascist because they're anti-Trump. And while they're partway there, just being anti-Trump doesn't necessarily make you anti-fascist, even though Trump has exhibited a lot of fascist tendencies.
He's a proto-fascist.
Like his disdain for human rights, he's withdrawn protections for trans people, his powerful cause of nationalism, stacking his cabinet with admitted nationalists.
Nationalists and captains of industry.
Obviously, his rampant sexism that has been documented throughout the years.
Sure.
His attacks on media, like he hates CNN, he hates New York Times, the failing New York Times, just attacking mass media with the corporate power. He's a corporate magnate. He is the Trump brand. Obviously, that's the corporate angle. Disdain for anyone that is perceived as intellectual or within the arts.
Right. Attacking anyone smart who disagrees with you as being the liberal elite.
Obsession with crime and punishment, cronyism, fraudulent elections, any of that, that's all like fascism 101. How do I instill fascism? And he's just following the playbook.
I almost feel like he's stumbling through the playbook rather than really focusing on and purposefully drilling through it.
He's stumbling through it because the people who are in charge don't really know how to say it to make it sound like it's not fascism, because he's empowering the white nationalists and below him to take over. Because honestly, I would not be shocked if he lost the 2020 election, but it's not going to be a Democrat or a liberal who wins the 2020 election. It's going to be somebody who's going to be way worse than Trump, but also way smarter, like a Mike Pence 2.0, who knows like how to make it sound like white people are under attack.
Yeah, it could take us back to like the respectable DC politics, no matter what he's pushing.
It is definitely scary to think about, what if Trump was 10% competent? He could be doing a lot more damage than what he's doing right now if he really buckled down.
That's why I feel like it's a catch-22. When you say we need to impeach Trump, like, well, I don't want him in power, but at the same time, I'd rather have him in power as opposed to Mike Pence, who's actually media savvy and knows what to say to make it sound like he's not pushing a certain agenda.
Right, or even if you get rid of Mike Pence, the next one in line is Paul Ryan, right?
Oh, absolutely.
President Paul Ryan. Jesus Christ.
I don't want to be put in that situation at all.
The devil you know.
Yeah, and Mike Pence definitely has the media savvy. I mean, he was on CLAB 2021.
Right.
If only Captain Murphy was running.
But
chainsaw hand.
If it was just that episode where that vending machine fell on him. There you go.
We might actually be doing better with Captain Murphy at the helm because at least half of his inane schemes were somewhat benevolent.
To bring it back locally, someone who I've been thinking about a lot lately is Ben Sass, who really does seem like he is positioning himself as the front runner of kind of the anti-Trump Republican wing that people like Bob Corker and even McCain to some extent are kind of aligning themselves with.
And his ridiculous attempt at trying to argue with Richard Spencer.
Yeah, dude.
Right.
Oh, did they do a rap battle like Eminem and Baked Alaska? Because that sounds amazing.
I mean, in a way.
Almost, but they tried to open a dialogue, and you can't dialogue with fascists because if it's on Twitter, they're just going to mock you. If it's in the streets, they're just going to kill you. Like, I don't understand where this, like, hey, I'm going to attack the biggest troll in the United States.
Well, it's because it's Ben Sass. Ben Sass only wants to do the thing that looks good, not the thing that actually is good.
Like laughing on live TV about a racist joke that Bill Maher says.
Yeah, or occasionally going on Twitter to chastise Donald Trump and then voting for his entire legislative slate.
Yeah, I don't know. Ben Sass, man, I worry about him because he likes to pretend that he is anti-Trump and I'm glad that he's, attacking Richard Spencer for what it's worth, but if he was in power, he would just enact a Christian theocracy, just like Mike Pence would. I mean,
the
that's
Christian
his dream.
version of Sharia law.
Right.
Madam Speaker, I come before the House today in strong opposition to the Employment Non-Discrimination Act to prohibit employment discrimination based on sexual orientation. I believe in civility and decency in society. But the problem here is that by extending the reach of federal law to cover sexual orientation, employment discrimination protections, in effect, can wage war on the free exercise of religion, emanating as it does out of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, for practicing your faith or acknowledging your faith in the workplace. Because the homosexual employee objects to passages in the Bible relating to homosexuality. We must stand for the right of every American to practice their faith according to the dictates of their conscience, whether it be in the public square or in the workplaose.
Well, hold on.
Specifically, do we need
to close this out before we continue?
Yeah, we should probably close out the recording at least.
Let's wrap this. What is?
No.
No, hold on. No, don't stop.
We got to do like an actual outro.
Okay. What is the official Twitter handle?
So the Nebraska Antifa Twitter handle is Antifa_NE.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty
simple
straightforward.
enough. I'm sure you could just search for Antifa Nebraska too.
And our blog is antifaneb.noblogs.org.
We've got
thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.